Right. Welcome to our webinar today, Lessons Learned, Migration to ISO 45001, 2018. Hello and welcome. My name is Melissa Heatley and I'm the NSF-ISR Marketing Manager and the host of today's webinar, which will focus on the lessons learned while migrating from OHSAS 18001 to ISO 45001. To kick things off, we will provide some brief introductions of our presenter as well as the Occupational Health and Safety Technical Team. We will then jump into an overview of ISO 45001, migration timeline, as well as the requirements. We will outline the migration process and address some best practices. We will then review migration data from the past year and review some of the common areas where nonconformances were found. After this, we will highlight some of NSF's ISR's optional tools, and finally, we will take a look into the future. Our parent company, NSF International, is a global organization providing services in over 175 countries around the globe, with offices and laboratories in over 61 countries. NSF International is a global, independent public health and safety organization with a mission and focus on protecting and improving human health. NSF International Strategic Registration is an NSF International company. We're also known as NSF-ISR. We deliver high-quality third-party audits to international standards around the world. And with that, I will pass it over to today's presenter.
Thank you, Melissa. My name is Joy Keniston-Longry, and I'm the Environmental Health and Safety Business Unit Manager for NSF-ISR. Thank you for taking your time to be with us today to learn about best practices and lessons learned for migration to Occupational Health and Safety ISO 45001. I am a graduate of the University of Washington in Seattle. I have a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Arts and my Master's in Public Health. I also am a professional environmental engineer licensed in the state of Washington, as well as being a registered environmental health specialist. And I have my lead auditor credentials in a number of international standards, including ISO 45001, ISO 14001, Responsible Care Management, and Global Wind Organization Health and Safety. I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce some key members of the Environmental Health and Safety Technical Team. First off, I'd like to introduce Joe Plaxton. He's the Environmental Health and Safety Technical Scheme Manager. He has been with NSF for nearly 8 years, and he has decades of experience in quality management, including a master's degree in quality management. Our other team member, who's relatively new to NSF-ISR, but has been with NSF International for some time, is Molly Ellenboss. She's our Environmental Health and Safety Technical Specialist, and I'm going to let Molly give you a little bit more detail about her background. And welcome, Molly, to our team.
Hello, everyone. I am Molly Ellenboss. I hold a master's degree in chemistry and have a strong background in automotive and protective marine coatings. I will be your primary point of contact for questions related to the Occupational Health and Safety Information Update Form, and I support both the technical team on issues and assist the account managers with any client questions related to the ISO 45001 migration process.
Thank you, Molly. The Environmental Health and Safety Business Unit supports sustainability in a number of areas through the implementation and third-party certification of international standards. As you know, there's 3 pillars for sustainability. The planet pillar, or the environmental pillar, is supported by ISO 14001, which is the environmental management system, which is considered to be the premier environmental management system globally. And then the second pillar is the people pillar, and ISO 45001, Occupational Health and Safety, supports that pillar. And then the third pillar associated with sustainability is profit or economics. So the effective implementation of any management system, whether it be environmental, occupational health and safety, quality, or other management system, can support your organization with your bottom line. So there we have our triple bottom line, the 3 pillars of sustainability: people, profit, and planet. Today, we're going to be focusing on ISO 45001, which is Occupational Health and Safety Management System. And just as a reminder, the reason why we're focusing on this is because it is so important to people around the world and to every organization around the world. Each year, over 2.78 million people die at work from either work-related injuries or diseases. And that is equivalent to about 7,600 people each day from work-related injury and diseases. This data is from the International Labour Organization from 2017. And so with the current world situation, some of these situations may even have changed. Regardless of the situation or the year or the date, any time there's an injury, illness, or death work-related incident, it's a huge burden to the worker's family, to the worker themselves, to the employees, the community, and the overall economy of the community and the world. The great thing about the Occupational Health and Safety Management System, ISO 45001, is it does provide your organization or any organization an opportunity to support a safe and healthy workplace, to assist you identify and to assist you meet or exceed occupational health and safety regulatory requirements, and to prevent work-related injuries, illnesses, or fatalities. This management system helps you create an organization of culture that supports occupational health and safety, identify risks associated with it, engage the workers to ensure that they're part of the solution and identify the issues so that you can continually improve, be effective, and meet your regulatory requirements. But most importantly is to protect the health and safety of the workers at your organization. We have had the opportunity, as we've gone through over this last 18 months of implementation or migration from OHSAS 18001 to ISO 45001, to be able to gain best practices and to get lessons learned, and also to receive feedback from our clients. And here's some examples as far as the clients being quite satisfied with the support of not only the auditors through the audit, but the technical team and the account managers and customer services as they've gone through this, with both using the tools and the scheduling and the entire process. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is, again, to go over the migration timeline and requirements. But again, I just wanted to reiterate that the purpose of this webinar is to provide you opportunities to understand continual improvement, to help you learn from the successes of other clients who've migrated successfully, to help you understand the steps and timing associated with the migration, and to support you with best practices and benchmarks so you can ensure a smooth transition from OHSAS 18001 to 45001. Molly, did you want to go over the timeline for us, please?
Yes. So just going over the major timeline for the migration to ISO 45001. March 12, 2018 was when the new ISO 45001 2018 standard was published, and that began the clock ticking for the 36-month migration period. We recommend that by November 10, 2020, that you have your migration audit from OHSAS 18001 to ISO 45001 scheduled and completed. This allows time for closure of any outstanding nonconformances that may be identified during the audit. On March 11, 2021, all OHSAS 18001 2007 certificates will expire. If you have any specific scheduling questions, please reach out to your NSF-ISR account manager or myself. So looking at the migration timeline, we have these 11 steps set out for you to provide a pathway for your ISO 45001 migration. Step 1 is to please submit your ISO 45001 migration information update form. If you have any questions, please contact me and I will assist you. Step 2 would be to pick your migration audit type. The different types of migration audits are the recertification, surveillance, or a special migration audit. We can also have different forms of these as remote, on-site, or partial remote and partial on-site. Please contact your account manager or myself if you need help scheduling your audit. Step 3 would be schedule, which is choosing a date for your migration audit. Once you have that scheduled, we can start moving ahead with your planning for your migration audit. You can do so by completing your internal audit and management review. Also, you can consider doing a gap analysis assessment. There's also optional tools available by us, such as our migration readiness tool. Also, you can participate in NSF-ISR webinars or view recorded NSF-ISR webinars. Also optional for your organization is to complete the ISO 45001 Delta checklist. However, it is encouraged to do, as it will help you ensure you are ready for your migration audit. The Delta checklist is a required step for your lead auditor to complete during your migration audit. Other optional tools are understanding organizational context and a tool for understanding needs and expectations of interested parties. Step 8 on our schedule is to ensure you have completed your migration audit by November 10, 2020. If there are special circumstances and you cannot meet this deadline, please contact your account manager to discuss your options for your migration audit. Step 9, once the audit is completed, the last step will be to complete and submit all corrective action documentation if identified during your migration audit. The final step is the best step, where you will be certified for ISO 45001 2018.
We're now going to transition into the migration audit, some best practices, and to share with you. So first off, we wanted to let you know that this is, of course, the information we have is based off data that we actually have, and it's based off a sample. And of this sample, I thought you would be interested that because ISO 45001 is part of the Organization for International Standards, it's based on the high level of structure that ISO put into place. We have a lot of integration. So surprisingly enough, out of the fairly large sample that we looked at for this presentation, only 8% of the organizations had a standalone ISO 45001 management system. It just happened to be what this sample is. So you can do that. But the biggest take-home story here is that 92% of the rest of these standards were integrated management systems. About a third of them were integrated management system with environmental management system. That's ISO 14001 and ISO 45001. And then the other approximately 40% were a combination of ISO occupational health and safety, quality management, and environmental management systems. There was a few little odd ones in there as well, but it just shows you how nice it is to be able, and how easy it is to be able to have an integrated management system with occupational health and safety, environmental management, and quality management. And then together you can integrate that into your ongoing business practices, which is what the entire goal is for the continual improvement of the management systems. As I mentioned before, that we will be referring to the high-level structure that the Organization for International Standards implemented in 2015. And so just to remind you all, these are the 10 clauses that make up the high-level structure. And so Molly and I will be referring to these clauses throughout the presentation, and we do have them color-coded. So I want you just to be aware of that. And we will be talking about both best practices as well as areas where there's room for improvement or people have struggled. Just to remind you that the first 3 clauses, the scope, normative references, and terms and conditions, do not have non-conformances written against them, so we will not be focusing much on those. So first off, I wanted to share with you some of the best practices that we've seen with organizations, and I think it's always good to benchmark yourself against organizations with best management practices and to figure out maybe you might want to follow these as well. Under the clause of leadership and worker participation, some of the key areas that we found were organizations that have been very successful in the early adaptation and adoption of ISO 45001 is that there is good top management involvement, and that the top management encourages and supports the development of the management system, and they have strong corporate support and corporate management to environmental and health and safety management system. Additionally, they have strong worker participation, and this is key to an effective and best management practice for occupational health and safety, because worker participation is a strong component of this particular standard. And so another best practice is they've had organizations have been able to clearly demonstrate good participation of workers and leadership, and have communicating with purpose is an example of one of the programs that a organization implemented, and that the employees were able to clearly demonstrate during the audit that they understood the company policies and how they contributed to safety management. And it was very obvious how the employees were consulted and participated in the development of new programs and processes. Another best management practice is in the planning area. And specifically there, that's where an organization needs to ensure that you're looking forward and you know what you're planning to do. So some of the best management practices that were observed included a strong ergonomics program, an effective risk assessment program for injuries, illnesses, and incidents, and the preservation of knowledge through employees. Having strong support is another area of key best management practices. Under support, as you know, there's resources, and having a good IT system and good support to support your management system is always really beneficial. And then competence and awareness were other good examples that were demonstrated by organizations, whether it was a project manager's knowledge of the management system and how it impacted the work that they were involved with, communications, awareness of employees, and competency of the people on site. Again, training of the product life cycle as it was associated with occupational health and safety, and if it was an integrated system with possibly quality and environmental management as well. And then strong record keeping practices as it supports the management system, occupational health and safety, or if it was integrated environmental or quality management system. So those were some strong best practices in those areas. And Clause 8 deals with operations, implementation, and planning and control. And some of the best practices that were observed include project teams that were highly experienced and had strong communication skills, delivering projects on time, on budget, without injuries or environmental incidents were also were also observed as best practices. And the development of subcontractors and the selection process to ensure that it's a risk-based decision-making process, whether it was occupational health and safety or if it was integrated, also including environmental or quality criteria for selection of subcontractors. And then again, demonstrating excellence and awareness of operations as it relates to risks associated with occupational health and safety. Again, as we talked about, the integration of the systems being fully integrated with each other as well as within the business itself really helps and supports an effective implementation of occupational health and safety and the needs of the organization. A key component of all management systems has to do with performance evaluation. And so best management practices that were observed was that each year the occupational health and safety objectives were enhanced and targeted and continued and demonstrated continual improvement. And so that's a fabulous outcome and what we're all striving to achieve with the occupational health and safety management systems. Best management practices also include effective internal audits, management reviews, and again, there it is, the electronic tracking system for occupational health and safety. So you can see, again, the support of IT is important. Improvement is the last area of the high-level area of clauses. And in those areas, again, a best management practice was the support of the 3-year internal audit matrix and measurements, and ensuring that there's an effective process for identification of near misses, incidents, doing the investigation of those and understanding root cause analysis and correcting it, and the ongoing continual improvement and dedication of site managers to maintaining and improving improvement of occupational health and safety. So our next area here is we're going to be talking about some of the lessons learned, and we're using as our indicators some of the areas where organizations had opportunities for improvement via nonconformances. And I'm going to have Molly give a high-level overview, and then I will get into some of the specifics. Molly?
Yes, so the sample used for this webinar included organizations that 46% had no nonconformances or corrective actions identified as part of their migration audit, and 45% of the sample had minor nonconformances or corrective actions identified, and only 9% had a major nonconformance or corrective actions. We will now take a look in a bit more detail about the nonconformances in this sample. As you are all aware, the ISO 45001 Occupational Health and Safety follows the standard hierarchy 10 clauses common to all new international standards. This pie chart illustrates the areas in the sample that had minor nonconformances identified as part of the migration audit, from OHSAS 18001 to ISO 45001. You can see in this pie chart, our auditors found nonconformances in almost every clause, and the largest being clause 8 of operations, which had 38% of the nonconformances. Clauses 6 and 7, planning and support, both held 17% of the nonconformances. Clause 9, which is performance evaluation, held 15%, and clause 10 and clause 5 were both around 7%, and those are in improvement and leadership. As expected, there was no nonconformances in clause 1, 2, or 3. This bar chart shows a bit more detail by clause and subclause. The top 5 subclauses where nonconformances were found were 8.1, which is operational planning and control, which had about 34% of clause 8 overall nonconformances. 6.1, which is part of planning and its actions to address risk and opportunities. 7.5, part of resources and its documented information. 10.2, which is incident, nonconformity, and corrective actions for improvement. And 9.2, which is performance evaluation, and it's involved with the internal audits. I will now send it back to Joy for a more in-depth look of these nonconformances.
Thank you, Molly. We are now going to be sharing with you a standard set of slides so that you can see the format of this. And we're going to go clause by clause rather quickly at a high level. And this particular, we're going to go in order of clause. So we're going to start with leadership and worker participation. In the red box there, you can see the specific subclauses. 5.1 is leadership, 5.2 environmental policy, etc. So that's how the international standard is organized. Down below in the white box, you can see that that is by clause, the percentage in clause 5 of where nonconformances were found. So overall, as Molly just explained, in the leadership and worker participation, that only accounted for about 6% of the nonconformances that were identified in the migration audits in this sample. And of those, the biggest area of nonconformance actually had to do with the consultation and participation of workers, which is section clause 5.4. That was then followed by the roles and responsibilities and authorities. So the lesson learned here is be sure that you involve workers and consult with them and be sure that they have an avenue to participate and that their roles, responsibilities, and authorities are clear. On the next slide, we have some examples of areas or examples of the specific nonconformances. So on 5.4, consultation and participation of workers, one of the examples is that the organization's process did not quite effectively incorporate avenues for consultation and participation of workers. So you know this is an area that you may want to learn from others to improve your process or to benchmark against. Another example was in clause 5.3 under organizational roles and responsibilities. The process for defining the organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities was not completely effective in accordance to the observations documented by the auditor. Next slide. So following that same setup, we're going to be talking about planning here. And again, you can see in the green box the different subsections associated with planning. And overall, for all of the nonconformances in this sample size, 17% of nonconformances were found in the planning section. And of those, almost half, or 44% of those, were found in the clause 6.1.2, which had to do with hazard identification and assessment of risks and opportunities. So this tells me that the auditors were clearly looking at, because again, this is occupational health and safety, so we want to be sure that we're identifying those risks and those hazards and identify opportunities and risks to ensure we prevent that. So we found, again, almost half, or 44%, followed by another 27%, or about a third, of ensuring that each organization determine what their legal and other requirements are as outlined in the international standard and by local, national, and international requirements. Next slide. Some examples of specific findings found in the planning had to do with 6.1 is that the organization's determination of legal requirements and other requirements is not fully effective. Section 6.1.2 we talked about already, that the hazard identification and assessment of risk and opportunities was not completely effective. And then 6.2.1 is that the organization did not incorporate worker participation in the development of occupational health and safety objectives. So those are some examples. We put these out there so you can learn and benchmark against your performance against that. The next section has to do with support. In the purple box, you can see the different subsections in support. In the pie chart, you can see that of the sample that we looked at, about 17% of the nonconformances were found in the support section. If you look at the white box, 26% of those, about a quarter of them, were under the control of documents. Documented information was another key one, and incompetency of the resources, and that's of staff as defined by the organization. Next slide. Under the support section, here are some examples of findings that were found, so you can again learn to be sure that maybe you don't repeat this yourselves. 7.2, records to demonstrate competence were not always available, so be sure that you are training your staff and that you maintain those records to demonstrate competency. And then 7.5 says during the review of contractor agreements documents, it was noted that ISO 45001 was not referenced within the document and only 14001. So obviously this was an integrated audit. Be sure you go through and update your documents and references, but this again looks at ensuring, if you look at 7.5, that you've identified and communicated the expectations as you do procurement, whether it's purchasing of products or contracts or contractors. Next slide. Clause 8, operations. As Molly mentioned, 38%, or almost two-thirds, or excuse me, a third of the findings in this sample had to do with operations. Operational planning and control was about 24% of it. Eliminating hazards and reducing occupational health and safety hazards actually was the leading area in the operational section. So Again, be sure that your organization is looking at these occupational health and safety hazards and risks, and that you should have been identifying that in the planning section, but when you're actually out doing the actual work in your planning and control during operations, we're also needing to take a look at that. So that is the area that you really need to focus on. So those are the two biggest areas that were identified. Specific examples include in 8.1, the operational process was not completely effective. 8.1.2, the process to ensure workers wear proper protective PPE equipment while in work areas was not fully effective. 8.2, the emergency preparedness and response process was not completely effective. And then 8.2, the control of the emergency equipment was not fully effective. So those are all things, both the ongoing operations and emergency preparedness. And as some organizations may be going through shutdowns and startups, and so this is all an opportunity to take a look at your operational process to ensure you have an effective process in place. Next slide. Clause 9 has to do with performance evaluation. And again, in the about 15% in the pie chart of the non-conformances found in the sample were under performance evaluation. The orange box talks about the different clauses associated with this particular subsection of the international standard. And if you go down to the white box, you can see that 31%, or about a third of the findings in this particular clause, had to do with your internal audit. Be sure and do an internal audit to ISO 45001 before your audit, your migration audit. The other major area had to do with evaluation of compliance, and compliance has to do with not only regulatory compliance, but also other obligations that were identified in previous portions of the international standard, including context of the organization and understanding needs and expectations of interested parties. And then the next major area was monitoring, measuring, and analysis of performance evaluation. Next slide. So examples that were found specifically by auditors in this sample for internal audit is 9.2, that the system for internal audits was found to be partially effective. So be sure, like I said before, be sure and do your internal audit and be sure it's effective. 9.1, monitoring, measuring, and analysis of your performance. The process for analysis of data was not completely effective. And again, be sure you are collecting the information that you've identified in Clause 6 and that you're measuring it and on an ongoing basis. Clause 9.3, the process for reacting to trends from analysis or test results and documenting the outputs of the management system was not fully effective. So this can help direct you to learn from others as far as some best practices in areas where we can all continually to improve. So the goal of sharing this information with you is to help you identify areas that others have struggled with so that you don't repeat that same situation in your organization. So as I mentioned before, under Clause 9, it has to do with performance management. And one of the areas that it was found to people have struggled with is ensuring that they're in conformance with not only regulatory requirements, legal requirements, but also other obligations. So I just wanted to remind you that in Clause 4, which is context of the organization, where the organization looks at both the context of the organization as well as the needs and expectations of the workers, then you need to identify which of those, you need to document that you looked at that, and then which of those interests or areas that were identified in context of the organization, that becomes, you need to consider whether that's going to become a commitment by your organization or not. And you need to say, well, yes, we are going to consider that, that's going to be part of it or not. And so that's where we've seen organizations struggle. Yeah. So from there, the context of the organization then goes down and feeds into the leadership and worker participation. And there may be some areas that are identified by workers, and then that also might become part of the obligations that would then become part of the conformance or other obligations associated with this clause number 9. That then goes into planning. And again, you would narrow them down. And that feeds into operations, which then in turn feeds into your performance evaluation. So we've pulled out the different clause numbers there so you can see which specific clauses that are actually referred to and back and forth within performance evaluation through this string to help you understand that. And then that will also help you in your continual improvement in clause 10. I also wanted to just say too that if you have that in the we do have some optional tools for our clients, and that is an optional tool. Optional tool 1 will help you understand the context of your organization. It goes into detail as far as the kinds of things that are outlined in detail in the appendix of the international standard, but it puts it in a framework of an Excel spreadsheet so you can identify that. And so that is an optional tool that's available to our clients, and we can give that to you through NSF Online and NSF Connect. Also, optional tool number 2 talks about the needs and expectations of interested parties, and it pulls together in a simple format. Potential interested parties are identified in the appendices, and then obviously you can, on any of those optional tools, you can enhance it to meet your needs. And then it talks about how you document that so that you can go through this process, and it may be an opportunity for you to be sure that you catch that so that you can use that as a best performance or a tool to potentially help you. Again, optional. The last area in the international standard has to do with continual improvement or improvement. And this represented about 7% of the nonconformances in the sample size that we looked at here. And all of those had to do, again, with incident and nonconformities and corrective actions. Specific examples found in this area had to do with ensuring that the organization's process to react in a timely manner, to take action to control and correct a nonconformity as it relates to the deficiencies found in their inspection report was not effectively maintained. Another example had to do with the system for their incident investigation was found to only be partially effective. And then again, their process for reviewing corrective actions was not fully effective. So those are examples of nonconformances found in this sample. Again, we share this with you so that you can learn from that and improve yourself. As Molly mentioned, about a little under half of our organizations went through the migration with no nonconformances, and about 45% had minor nonconformances, and a little under 10% had major nonconformances. And for those nonconformances, we found those in 1, 2, 3, 4 clauses in the clause 6, clause 8, clause 9, and clause 10. So one of the examples of the major nonconformance under 9.2 was internal audit. This particular quote shows records of the internal audit for the processes to ISO 45001 were not available for review during the audit, so that became a major nonconformance. 6.1, not all of the occupational health and safety risk assessments had been completed. We're going to go into some of the tools, and I'm going to transfer this over to Molly.
Yes, so I will be going over a couple of the tools that we have available for you all to use online or through NSF Connect. So a good place to always start is the NSF-ISR webpage. Please check periodically for updated information. We also have good links to helpful forms, tools, and references that can be found here. It's always helpful to save NSF-ISR on your desktop, but an alternate easy way to search for it is to go to NSF-ISR, click on Standards and Transitions, and then click on ISO 45001 2018 migration. We also have this QR code here for you to be able to scan it and take you to the Standards and Transition page. On the Standards and Transition page, we have links to several optional tools to assist you with a smooth migration from OHSAS 18001 to ISO 45001. In the next couple of slides, I'll give you just an overview of all of these tools. On NSF Connect, as we have said earlier, There's tool number 1 and tool number 2, the understanding the organization and its context and understanding needs and expectations of insured parties. These will be found in the toolbox on NSF Connect, and you can use the QR code to get to NSF Connect. One of the first tools on the website is the ISO 45001 Migration Process Overview. This is just an electronic PDF handout and provides an overview of NSF-ISR migration process. It includes the audit option choices you have, surveillance, recertification, and special, and how your choice impacts your audit cycle and timing. It also highlights plan, do, check, act, and act cycle, and how your organization actions in preparation for migration to ISO 45000 meets plan, do, check, and act. We also have our on-demand webinars on the standards and transition page. Just a couple highlights of the webinars specific to ISO 45001 include an overview of ISO 45001, an NSF-ISR migration process from OHSAS 18001 to ISO 45001, and NSF-ISR COVID-19 related audits. This also applies to the ISO 45001 2018 migration audits. We recognize that most of our clients have integrated audits with quality management, ISO 9001, and environmental management, ISO 14001, and also other standards. There's many webinars available specific to those standards as well on the website. Next up, we have the ISO 45001 Occupational Health and Safety Management System Migration Guide. This is a guide in a PDF format and includes highlights of any changes from OHSAS 18001 to ISO 45001. It highlights key features or changes by clause. It frames the ISO 45001 into the plan, do, check, and act. It has tips on where to begin with the migration process, and it also provides a side-by-side comparison by clause from 18001 to 45001. Also on the website is the Upgrade Planner and Delta Checklist. This is a word-based tool that will help you know if you are prepared or not for your migration audit. You could potentially use as an optional tool to assist you with your internal audit for readiness. As I just want to state, this is an optional tool for clients to complete, although it is mandatory for your NSF-ISR auditor to complete and submit as part of the migration audit. So it's just helpful to take a look at and to possibly do it yourself. Lastly, we have our migration readiness tool. This is just an online readiness tool with a series of questions about that your organization would answer. The results based on your answers inform you of your readiness for migration audit. It encourages organizations to take multiple times over time so you can get a snapshot of your progress. On this slide is just an example of a mock-up of readiness results, indicates that mock organization is not yet prepared. The tool helps any organization focus on areas that they need to be more ready at. It's very helpful to use, and just a reminder, the QR code will bring you to that standards and transition page where all these tools can be found. I'm just gonna give it back over to Joy for our last section of this webinar, which is looking ahead at the future.
Thank you, Molly. So looking ahead, as we've provided this information to you so that you have some ideas of what best practices that we have observed during organizations who have successfully migrated to ISO 45001, and then some areas where others have struggled, so you can learn from that for a benchmark. I wanted to point out a couple of things to you that is highlighted in the international standards. And again, the adoption of the Occupational Health and Safety Management System is intended to enable your organization to provide safe and healthy workplace, prevent work-related injuries and ill health, and continually improve your occupational health and safety performance. And this is straight out of the standard. As we talked about, the standard was published in March of 2018. It triggered a 3-year transition period. Since that time, we've all experienced the pandemic, public health and safety. And so we've identified some alternative approaches, and that's continually being adjusted as we move through this process. As we mentioned, there is a COVID-19 alternative approach webinar that is available for your, if you haven't participated in it, it's available on demand so you can take a look at it. And then again, we want to ensure that as we move forward through the next several months, it's imperative that you do schedule your audit so that whether it's remote or on-site or combination, so that you get the dates that is preferred for you, preferred for your schedules, and so that we can be adaptive and flexible with what's going on. But we want to ensure that you have a successful migration with the audit. NSF is committed to being clear and consistent and supporting you in the pathway forward as it relates to your migration. And again, we are working with our 7 core values of sound scientific principles, highest ethical standards and integrity, innovation and creativity, and demonstrating social and environmental responsibility for ensuring that you have an effective migration audit as part of your journey to protecting public health and safety and worker health and safety as part of your management system. Looking ahead, if I had a crystal ball, which I don't, but I would suggest that the first thing you need to do looking ahead is to actually lock in your migration audit date now. To do that, you can contact your NSF account manager or Molly, who you met earlier in this presentation. The sooner you confirm your date, the more likely you are to get your preferred date for the audit. As far as migration options for the audit, as we've talked about previously, there are 3 options. You can either do recertification, do a migration audit at surveillance, or a special audit. The handouts that Molly mentioned earlier will specifically tell you what the options are and the impact on your cycle of your certificate. In addition to getting a migration audit at recertification, surveillance, or at a special audit, you also now have the choice of having either an on-site audit, a remote audit, or partial on-site or remote. Some of this is somewhat dependent upon the COVID-19 window. And if you want to understand a little bit more about the remote audit options, there is a specific webinar that we referred to earlier in the presentation that you could go to, and that explains in detail, or you can contact myself or Molly or the account manager. Again, looking ahead, we're here to support you in a successful journey on your migration from OHSAS 18001 to ISO 45001. We've shared with you some of the best practices and the lessons learned from the past audits to support you as a benchmark and to help you continually improve and to proactively manage change throughout your organization. Again, ensure the whole purpose of occupational health and safety is to help you identify risks and opportunities so you can appropriately monitor and manage the risk associated with that at the workplace. And to ensure that, and part of that is to ensure that you are being proactive and not just reactive, and that you're looking at the right indicators, whether they're lagging or leading indicators associated with injuries or health indicators. And especially with the recent events that took us all by surprise in 2020, you may want to take a look at the clauses that we have identified below, both the context of the organization, planning on your risks and opportunities, and communications and operational controls, to ensure that you've taken into consideration the current context of the organization, not only at your organization, but along your supply chain, to support occupational health and safety. And as if you're in a shutdown, as you start up, and possibly ensure that there may be some risks that are new that you hadn't thought of before. So you may want to relook at that to validate that you've identified the right processes. Again, utilizing your management system to look ahead. Section 8.1.3 in Occupational Health and Safety Management System speaks directly to management change. And this talks about control of planned and unplanned temporary and permanent changes. So as organizations, some organizations may have had some planned and unplanned shutdowns and startups. So use your management system to support you with that. And as you learn new knowledge with respect to occupational health and safety, hazards, illnesses, or risks, you need to incorporate that into your management system. And again, down at the bottom, I've highlighted these with the underlines. Your organization does need to review the consequences of any unintended changes or plan changes and taking into consideration any mitigation factors. So this is both in management of change, and it also would support your emergency preparedness and response plan in 8.2. Next slide. Oh, and here we have 8.2. And again, be sure that you've taken a look at your emergency preparedness and response plan with respect to public health emergency in the workplace as it supports risks and opportunity. So this now, looking ahead, this might be something you might want to refresh as you move forward as part of your migration and updating. Even if you did it like, say in December, you might want to retake a look at it now, given the new information we all have. And then while you need to look at all of these areas in the emergency response, the Clause D talks about evaluating performance and, as necessary, revising the plan response and including after any testing or any after a particular occurrence of an emergency situation. So just be sure and do that, and be sure maybe the scenarios you have represent what currently is going on in the context of your organization. So in summary, some of the lessons learned looking back retrospectively, this is color coded by clauses. We want to be sure that you include your workers and the consultation and ensure that there's an effective mechanism for them to be consulted and participate in your occupational health and safety program, ensuring they have clear roles and responsibilities. As you look at the planning section, be sure you've identified your occupational health and safety risks and opportunities, and you may want to refresh that. And ensure that your occupational health and safety legal requirements and other requirements as identified in the previous, like in the context of organization and interested parties, have been documented, and those that are going to be carried forward as other requirements are documented and demonstrated to be in conformance. In the resource clause, procurement and contracting, be sure you've incorporated occupational health and safety requirements. In the operational field, that's where we've seen the majority of the non-conformances, and so you can learn from that to be sure that you have effectively implemented your occupational health and safety operational controls and looking at your emergency preparedness and management. Performance evaluation, as it supports occupational health and safety. Be sure you get your internal audit done to ISO 45001 as well as your management system, and that it's documented. And that you have clear management of your occupational health and safety incidents, injuries, or illnesses or near misses, and you can document that and demonstrate as continual improvement. Looking forward, again, lock in your migration audit now. Use your management system to help you identify and validate that you have identified the right occupational health and safety risks and opportunities, and you've managed them. Do you have the right key indicators there to help you both in the long-term trends and then near-term as well? Use the optional tools as appropriate to help you to help yourself. Be sure you complete your internal audit and management review to ISO 45001 and enjoy the journey to certification to ISO 45001. It's a continual improvement. The plan, do, check, act. If you have any questions about scheduling, here are our account managers, and then we also have Molly or myself, and we're here to help you and support you in a smooth transition. Thank you again for your time, and Molly, Joe, and myself are always available to assist you with any questions that you might have. I wanted to thank you for your commitment to occupational health and safety. The work that you do and the work that your organization does to occupational health and safety management system and to protecting the health safety of the workers, your contractors, your community really do make a big difference to not only your business, to the community, but it makes a difference today and for future generations. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email or phone or Molly, and we're here to help you. Thank you.